Hey guys! Today we interrupt our regular program to bring you news of our plans. Did you not like what I said?
No, but it sounded like a tornado or a thunderstorm was coming.
Yeah, that's kind of on the same level. Today we are going to compare Mediterranean sailing versus Caribbean sailing because it's a question that we've had on our minds ever since the start of the season, really. Because we are currently sailing the Mediterranean and we need to make a choice now in July. Should we stay in the Mediterranean or should we cross the Atlantic to go sail the Caribbean? And the reason why we need to make that choice now is because we are going to need that time from July, August to prepare our boat, to start making our way back to the doors of the Med, and also to make sure that we're perfectly ready to cross the Atlantic. So we've had that deadline for a long time.
Yeah.
And that's what we're going to talk about today. But first, we are going to compare sailing the Med versus sailing the Caribbean. Ooh, that was nice. Okay, before we start, we need to admit the fact that we haven't been sailing the Caribbean at all. If you follow this channel, you know that. And we haven't even sailed 100% of the Med either. So we've been in Spain, we've been to the Balearics, we crossed over to Corsica, now we're in Sardinia, we're gonna go to Sicily, and we're gonna go to Malta. That's where the choice will happen in Malta. Either we turn right or left, or either we turn west or east.
Depending on if you're looking south or north.
Yes. So we haven't actually sailed the Caribbean, so this pros and cons of the Med and pros and cons of the Caribbean actually comes from everything that we've heard from you guys, but also from our friends who are sailing the Caribbean and from our own experience of sailing
The Med.
the Western Med.
Yeah.
All right, so let's start. Pros of the Med. Do you want to start?
I'll start. It is very gorgeous here. The landscape is wonderful. It seems like every place we go to is just like new kind of jobbing.
Yes.
You
Like-
have written eye candies everywhere.
Yes, I mean it.
Yeah.
It's the Mediterranean, at least from what we've experienced, is absolutely beautiful, and we're really happy that we get to see it.
Yeah, and I think with that, like, there is a lot of history and there's a lot of architecture. So everywhere you go, there's just more history walking down the old streets.
Then, I mean, that's probably the most important for me, but in the Mediterranean, the food and wines are absolutely amazing. They're affordable, it's everywhere, it's just beautiful. We've had the Spanish food, we've had food from the Balearics, we've had French food, Corsican food, Sardinian food, Italian food. Just yesterday we were having some of the best pizzas in the world.
5-time world pizza champion, just last night. So you can't get that anywhere else.
All right, next, in the pros of sailing the Med, we have, oh yeah, this one is a big one. In the Med, you have really easy access to good infrastructures, good airports, big European cities. Ryan and I still work, especially you, and you need to travel now and then. So for us, it's been really nice to have access to all those big airports in Spain, in the Balearics, in Corsica, in Sardinia. Anytime that we need access to infrastructures, it's there. Also, with good infrastructure comes really good internet. The connectivity in the Med is absolutely great. There is Wi-Fi everywhere, 4G everywhere. We've never had any issue to get any work done here.
We did have to lift a cell phone up the mast in one anchorage to get enough data to upload a video.
Yeah, we did that. Okay, now to the cons of sailing the Med. So we did not expect this, but sailing the Med is actually really, really difficult. There is either too much wind or not enough wind. Right now we are in an anchorage. We sailed this morning here. We did not sail, we were actually on the engine. And we either had 3 knots of wind, and all of a sudden it became 25 knots of wind. And it's shifting all the time. It's really difficult. Before we entered the Med, when we were in Portugal, we met this lovely couple, Bill and Jess. And Bill and Jess gifted us with this fantastic book, which I'm gonna show you. It's Mediterranean Weather Handbook for Sailors. And I didn't really understand. I was like, oh, that's kind of cool, like Mediterranean weather. And
That's like a 150-page book on the weather systems. So the winds all have their own names depending on their direction. It's just crazy.
What it does is that the wind can change almost 4 times a day. So an anchorage that was really nice in the morning can be really bad at night.
Hello. It's 3 a.m. and the anchor alarm went off.
When we were sailing from Stockholm down to the doors of the Med, Gibraltar, it was fairly easy. We would be at sea for 3 days, at port for a week. In here, we have to change anchorage at least every other day. It also means that we've missed seeing a lot of really beautiful places because the weather did not allow us to see them right when we had the time to see them. In a couple of weeks, we're going to be picking friends down in Sicily, and there was this enormous mistral going through Corsica, and it meant that we had to leave Corsica way earlier than we wanted to, otherwise we were never going to make it to Sicily in time to pick our friends. So it's been really frustrating to deal with that.
Yeah.
Another thing that it does is that because all of a sudden a swell can pick up in the anchorage, we can't work anymore. When the boat rolls too much at anchorage, working on the boat is impossible. You get seasick, everything is flying around. What it means is you have to leave the anchorage and find a new place, and that can take 3, 4, sometimes 9 hours out of your day, which is okay when you're here for 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 weeks. It's your holiday, that's what you do, but with Ryan it's our life. So it's been quite difficult. Okay, next.
Where are we?
Oh, we are at
Oh, expense.
Yes.
That's a big one. The Med is extremely expensive. It is.
It can be.
Well, so when I say that, I'm talking about anything to do with boating. So marina fees, mooring wall fees, fuel is expensive in Europe, diesel in general.
But I don't think that it's like that everywhere in the Med, but in the Balearics, in Corsica, in Sardinia, in Sicily, in Malta, in Croatia.
So sometimes we have made decisions, like with the weather, like, oh, the weather's coming. In most cases, we would just go to a marina and seek shelter.
Mm-hmm.
But there's been times that we haven't because we're like, well, we don't want to pay 70 or 80 euro for the night.
And that's the cheaper ones. Typically, marinas for our size boats, which is 12 meters, are around 100 euros, which we are not ready to put in a marina unless there's a big emergency. Another thing that you will find in the Med, and that I don't think you find on the same level anywhere else, is the cost of the cruising permits. So if you want to sail in Croatia, now Greece have also started with cruising permits, it can cost hundreds of euros for 1 month cruising permit just to be able to sail there. Noonsite has tons of really good information about the cruising fees and the cruising permits, but that's also something that adds up at the end of the day.
Mm-hmm.
But probably the biggest con of sailing the Med is how long, or should I say short, the seasons are. This year we had to leave our boat in a marina between November and April. You can winter sail the Med, but then you're going to be hopping between anchorage and marinas, and instead of paying a marina for 6 months where you can get a better price, probably going to end up paying a lot in marinas just to be winter sailing. And because the weather is not that nice, I mean, for us at least, there is no big interest in sailing in the winter.
No.
So if we chose to stay in the Med this year, it means that we have to find a spot where to put polyseal for 6 months, and that's also an expense.
Mm-hmm.
And obviously during that time you're not sailing, so there is that. All right, let's move on to
Let's move. The Caribbean.
the Caribbean. Again, we have not sailed the Caribbean. This is what we've heard from all our friends that are there and who have sailed the Med and are now in the Caribbean. So, pros of sailing the Caribbean.
Beautiful landscapes. We said that in the last one, but it's true.
Yeah, it looks like the Caribbean are also really, really beautiful. There is also a lot of diversity. There are many, many countries in the Caribbean. And although a lot of people say that there is a lot of history in the Med, I do believe that there is a lot of history in the Caribbean as well.
Yeah.
And that's exciting to see.
Yeah.
The weather in the Caribbean looks a lot more stable in season than in the Mediterranean.
It's pretty funny when you pull predict wind map of the wind profile for a week in the Caribbean versus the Med. The Caribbean's just like wind this way the whole time. The Med is like
Yeah.
So it's much more predictable and stable.
Yes, because the winds are a little more stable, anchoring, we assume, is a little easier. And you can actually stay at an anchorage for a few days and be okay, and actually decide when it is that you want to leave the anchorage as opposed to having a big swell kick you out. At least that's what our friends have said. Okay, next.
The marinas are a bit cheaper. So that would be a positive. It'd give us a place to go sometimes.
Yes, we haven't heard that all marinas start at 100 euros.
Yeah.
Okay, we had little technical incidents in form of the battery dying on us, but we are back. Where were we? So one of the big pros of sailing the Caribbean is that when hurricane season comes, you can go pretty much anywhere you want to escape the hurricanes. You can go north to the US, you can go west and cross the Panama Canal to go in the Pacific, you can go south, and you can even cross back the Atlantic through the Azores, which you absolutely cannot do in the Med. When you want to exit the Med, you either go the safe way through Gibraltar or the adventurous way through the Suez Canal. We will not do the adventurous way. Okay, so what are the cons of sailing the Caribbean?
Well, for one, it's a little bit farther away to get places.
Traveling around the Caribbean in general is a little more expensive, it's a little more complicated. If anything happens to our home in Stockholm, that's going to be a big logistical hassle, but yeah, that's what it is.
Yep.
Another big con of sailing in the Caribbean is the internet situation. There isn't internet everywhere, the 4G is only so-so, and because there are so many different countries that don't have a data agreement among each other, the same way that Europe does, it's difficult. Also, it's not that we've heard that the food is bad, but the ciguatera is real. I am not super knowledgeable on the matter, but it's a disease that you can get when you eat reef fish, and it's particularly prominent in the Caribbean.
What else do we have on the list? So we've been told that the produce and the wines in the stores are a bit more expensive than what we would find in Europe. Yeah, that's a bit of a con.
And also, if it's pretty easy to sail from the south to the north of the Caribbean, if you want to go the other way around, you're going to be sailing upwind. And we all know what sailing upwind does to you. Some people like it. I'm not that kind of person. Now, guys, we have two alternatives.
The first is to turn east and head towards Greece and Turkey and maybe even the Black Sea. Or turn west and head back out through the Med, head to the Canaries and down to Cape Verde and then across to the Caribbean. Those are our options,
yes.
Really. Yeah.
And our idea was to put that choice up for our patrons to decide. It was something that I was really excited about. I personally did not have any preference. I think that both plans are really cool, and I was totally excited at the idea to include all of you in the choice of our destination next year. But when we kind of informally asked the community if we should go east or west, the community answered not anonymously but majoritarily for one of those routes, and we realized that Ryan was absolutely not ready
For that.
And so we kind of realized yesterday that putting this up to a vote was not an option, because we're two in this adventure and you need to be happy. You need to be happy with wherever it is that we go. So yesterday night we made a decision. And this year...
Oh, drum roll.
I'm gonna add a little sound effect here. Okay, are you ready?
Yep.
1, 2, 3. We're crossing the Atlantic.
Woohoo! Yay!
That's right. We are going to go to the Caribbean.
Yes. So our plan, as it is right now, we will see how it goes, is to turn west once we touch Malta, after we visit Malta, turn back to Spain. We're going to do one big push to Spain, 5-6 days. And then hopefully head back to Portugal, because that's how much we loved Portugal, before going down to either Madeira or Morocco, crossing to the Canaries, taking the Cape Verde route, and cross over to the Caribbean sometimes around the end of December. How do you feel about that decision, Ryan?
No, it's good. I think it's good that we have a plan, because we haven't... Last year our plan was to get to Gibraltar. We did. and then there was no plan after that. Our plan was to go in the Med and kind of question mark. So now we have a plan.
Yeah, I feel relieved that we also have a decision. It's been a little difficult. People have asked us, so where are you guys going? Are you going to Greece or blah blah? And we've always been like, well, we're kind of not decided, so it feels good to have a decision.
Mm-hmm.
I have to say I'm a little disappointed that we are not going to visit the eastern part of the Mediterranean, although we were never going to see everything.
No.
It's impossible. To see everything in the Med, you would have to stay
A long time.
a long time.
Yeah.
And we always wanted to cross oceans. We always wanted to go to the Caribbean. We really want to go to the Pacific, so I think that this may be the right move for us at this point.
Yep,
Time will tell.
it will.
So guys, what do you think? Do you think that we missed anything in our Mediterranean versus Caribbean sailing comparison? If you have more experience, please let us know in the comments. As to if we made the right decisions or not, I guess that's more like up to us to decide.
Come back in a year, we'll let you know.
We've also decided that it's time for us to do a proper live. It's been a long time since we hung out, you and I, and we kind of missed that. So we're gonna be doing that very soon.
Yeah.
So guys, thank you so much for watching. If you are new to this channel and you want to follow the Atlantic adventure, don't forget to subscribe and to click the little bell icon to get all the notifications. And we will resume our normal program in the coming few days with a video of us sailing Eastern Morocco. That is it. All right. Have a good day. Goodbye.
Bye bye.
The road ahead, it twists and turns.